Parents threatened my husband's life when I got engaged and I went no contact. Now they harass us to meet my son. I'm a 30-year-old woman and, to put it bluntly, my relationship with my father has always been a minefield. He could be the most loving, generous man but always with a price tag attached. Their love, both his and my mother's, felt conditional, transactional, almost calculated. My childhood was littered with his verbal and psychological barbs, his financial threats, and depending on how you define it, even physical abuse. When things would get really bad, my mom would vanish sometimes for hours, sometimes longer, unable to stop him or even stomach witnessing it. Add to that her struggle with addiction, and you get the recipe for childhood that was anything but safe. Never once did I feel I had parents I could confide in, or even just be myself with. To make things even more complicated, my parents have known my now husband since he was 8, our parents were best friends, which is how we met. His family's tragedy brought him even closer to mine, and, despite their own twisted logic, my parents tried to fill in as a support system for him while never really forgetting their own interests. He's their business partner, owning 25% of their company, and he's put a significant amount of money into it. They welcomed him as family long before there was talk of marriage. He even got their blessing 2 years before he proposed. We've been together for 8 years, friends even longer, and they adored him. Or so I thought. Everything came crumbling down this spring. My husband wanted one last getaway before our baby arrived, a final fun trip with friends, which has always been something we've done every couple of years. This time, everyone got invitations, my cousins, my brother though he couldn't make it, his sisters, and our closest friends. It was meant to be an ordinary trip. What I didn't know was that it was also going to be our engagement. Everyone wasn't on the surprise except me. My parents weren't invited, and I never expected them to be. They'd never come on any of these trips, and if they had, it'd have tipped me off for sure. The proposal was magical. We celebrated all day with friends, and the next day headed home. On the drive back, I called my mom with the news. Her response, "Cool." Then, she immediately launched into a half-hour rant about issues at the business. I told her I'd call again when we were closer to home, partly because I wanted to collect some sand from the beach where my now husband had proposed, partly because her reaction stung. I napped for a bit, but when I woke up, everything had exploded. My dad had sent me about 25 text messages, each more furious than the last. It was an onslaught. He told us to never contact them again. He told my husband to consider himself out of the business, the one he'd invested so much into. Given my father's history, he had literally assaulted an employee just a week before, and we have the video to prove it. I knew there was no reasoning with him. My husband couldn't go near the business without risking a confrontation, no matter how much he legally owned. That day marked the start of me going 100% no contact with both of my parents. What followed was pure chaos. My parents went nuclear, threatening my husband's life, showing up at our jobs, reaching out to our friends to malign us, insisting my husband was emotionally abusing me and trying to isolate me. They even called the police for wellness checks, and once came to my house while I was home alone, sneaking through bushes to get to my door because the gate was locked. They used relatives and fake numbers to try to reach me, forcing me to change my phone number while I was pregnant, needing nothing more than peace. They insisted I was using my baby as a weapon, but in reality, I refused to ever let them treat my child the way they treated me, or his father. Then, there was the business of the cars. My husband's family had several collector classics stored at my parents' property. When my mom showed up at my work, I wouldn't see her. I was pregnant, terrified, and convinced my father was waiting in the car. She left a note: we had 72 hours to move the cars or they'd be towed, 4 classic vehicles in total. My husband reached out, attempting to coordinate getting them, only for my father to make it clear he wasn't welcome and there'd be trouble if he set foot on the property. My husband tried to get a police escort through the court system. While he was there, my dad sent gleeful videos of the cars being loaded onto tow trucks off to be dumped at impound. He went so far as to brag that it'd take us days to even locate them, and it could cost us thousands to get them back. Thankfully, the court officer recognized the tow company, but when he called my dad, he only got rudeness in response. The situation only worsened, with my mom calling us cop calling cunts and snitches, and then harassment, and escalated from there. Some small favor of fate, the officer's hunch was right. We managed to get 2 of the cars before they made it to impound, and a third we had to pay to retrieve. My father kept the one he liked best, even boasting to the tow driver that he was looking forward to driving it in the summer. Eventually, they sent the 4th car to impound too, only because the tow company called us did we get it back, though it came with a dead rat inside, supposedly our punishment for being snitches. The cherry on top? They'd kept all the keys. Since then, there's been only silence from us save for that to one text my husband sent, trying to resolve things. I haven't looked back, my son will never know the chaos I endured at their hands. After everything that happened, my husband and I decided not to respond at all to any of my parents' attempts to contact us. The only exception was when my family insisted I make a video. They wanted me to show I was okay and choosing not to speak to my parents, since my parents had been telling everyone that I was being abused by my husband and forced into silence. Reluctantly, I recorded the video and sent it to a relative, who then delivered it to my parents. For a while after that, things quieted down, and I finally had a stretch of relative peace. But when I gave birth to my son a few months ago, and their first grandchild, it was like someone flipped a switch. Suddenly, the pressure ramped up again. My parents started contacting people left and right, trying to get them to convince me to reconcile or at least talk to them. They wanted people to send them pictures of my son behind my back. They even claimed my husband was doing petty things, like sending my dad a shirt that said certified narcissist, which is a total fabrication. My husband would never do something like that. My father seized on this so-called provocation as an excuse to email me. The email was nothing short of cruel. He made fun of the video I'd made, actually telling me I deserved an Academy Award for my performance, and claimed he and the rest of my family had a good laugh at my expense. Now I'm dealing with other relatives trying to guilt me into giving in. A few of them begged me to at least talk to my mom, saying things like they hope my motherly instincts will kick in and I'll realize how much my baby supposedly needs his grandparents. They tell me that family members who have passed away would be heartbroken if they knew about the situation. I keep hearing how I need to forgive my mother, because she did everything for me and is so hurt and depressed by what's happened. Meanwhile, my mom won't stop emailing me. I haven't responded to a single message. She even enlisted her friend, the same friend who once called me a stupid selfish bitch and outright denied I was ever abused, insisting I was only slapped 4 times as a kid for being a little slut with boys, in a text to my husband. Now, she and my mom have started sending packages for my son to our house, completely disregarding the boundaries I've tried so hard to set. Every time I get another message or another unwanted package, I'm reminded of just how far they'll go to bulldoze their way back into my life on their terms, not mine. And I refuse to let them rewrite my story. Update 1. After moving out of state, and while in the process of selling our old house, the situation with my parents became more volatile than I could have anticipated. My father, for reasons that will never make sense to me, firmly believed he deserves a cut of the home's equity just because he'd found the place for us and rented it from the owner before we bought it. Naturally, I didn't agree, but that didn't stop him from acting on his entitlement. My mother, meanwhile, trespassed at our house again. This time, the situation escalated. She and my husband got into a shouting match on our front porch, voices sharp and words flying. I only found out later, to my horror, that her brand new car had onboard recording and had captured the entire fight. It turned out my parents then sent that audio out to practically everyone. My father used it as proof of my husband's true nature, his mind. If my husband could shout at my mother, then of course he would turn on me soon, too. I managed to get my mom to leave the day by calling my husband and letting him put me in on speakerphone so I could speak directly to her. Shortly after, my father showed up at my husband's work and threatened him, challenging him outright to step outside and handle it. I was completely shaken. All this came on the heels of another contact with my mother, not out of desire, but guilt. Her sister, my aunt, had just overdosed and was in the hospital. My mother's lupus diagnosis weighed heavy, and family pressure became suffocating. When those factors collided with her showing up uninvited at our home, I caved and met with her. Closure was what I told myself I wanted, but really, I was also just feeling guilty, as intended by her manipulations. During our conversation, I let slip which state we were moving to. I stupidly thought she'd respect our wish for distance if she felt included somehow. Looking back, I wish I'd known about gray rocking then. It would have saved me a lot of regret. She insisted she was entitled to a relationship with me because she gave birth to me. She lamented that she believed we had a closer relationship than we ever truly did, and that I'd wounded her by not calling after my engagement, not inviting her to my baby shower, nor having her at the hospital for my son's birth, even though we were strictly no contact at the time. She did apologize, but her words barely grazed the surface. It was mostly lament after lament about how much I'd allegedly hurt her, and how she wished she could be a grandma to my son. As if that weren't enough, she argued my husband owed her an apology for shouting at her, insisting she had only come to check on me. Just days before we left the state, we were blindsided with legal paperwork. My father's lawyer had served us. My parents were suing us for equity in our home, alleging we'd agreed to give them part of it, which wasn't true. They wanted a lien on our property for $300,000. My mother's name was on the papers, so I confronted her, But she played baffled, claiming she had no clue. The following day, she told me casually, as if discussing the whether that my father had plans to also sue my husband's family estate, on the bizarre grounds that my husband had abandoned his fiduciary duties as a business partner. Never mind that we had texts from my father explicitly telling my husband he wasn't welcome back at the business. We even had messages where he promised to halt any financial traction my husband could make. My mother insisted she convinced him to drop the lawsuits provided we don't fuck with him or her. Evidently, my father's justification was that he'd put any suit winnings in a trust account for our son. That excuse didn't fool anyone. The day before we left for our new life, I met my mom one last time. We were at a small coffee shop nearly an hour from my parents' business, so my guard was down until one of my father's employees walked in. He gave my mom a hug, grabbed a coffee, said goodbye, and lingered outside by my car. It struck me as odd, but I brushed it off, not thinking he'd know which car was mine. After saying my goodbyes to my mother and telling her we'd be leaving sometime that week, I left for home. While driving, my phone pinged with a weird notification, but I didn't check it because I was at the wheel. I forgot about it until the next day. That's when, 15 minutes into our interstate drive, both my husband and I got a notification on our phones. An unknown device detected that had been traveling with us. I opened the Find My app, my breath freezing. 3 unknown trackers had followed us since my meeting with my mother. The map traced every place we'd gone, home, the pediatrician, even the gas station for snacks before our road trip. We pulled over immediately. My husband searched the car and uncovered 2 off-brand airbags hidden, magnetized to our tow hitch. My heart hammered as we called the police and filed a report. Even a month later, the investigation is ongoing. I haven't confronted my mother about it. Whether she orchestrated it or simply tipped off my father to our meeting, I know telling her would only tip them off that we're planning on pressing charges. One thing is certain, I won't let them turn our lives upside down ever again. Update 2. He'd gotten a warrant for the account behind the devices and, of all the infuriating things, they weren't even cleverly hidden Apple IDs. They were Find My certified third-party tags registered to an Apple account using my father's company domain. The serials matched 2 units purchased on the same receipt paid for with a business card. The kicker? Traffic cams and a convenience store camera across from the coffee shop caught the same employee who hugged my mother walking to a truck, idling near my car, and then pulling into the strip of shade where our hitch would have been accessible. He tried to be slick with a ball cap and mask, his tattoos did him in. When officers brought him in, he caved fast. He told them my father gave him the tags and the magnet mounts, that mom would text him my arrival and departure because she didn't want to lose her kid to some manipulative asshole. He even handed over the cash transfer and screenshots to save his own skin. The detective's tone changed after that. It wasn't just document everything. He said the words interstate stalking. He used phrases like pattern of conduct, credible threats, and conspiracy, and walked us through applying for a protective order in our new state that recognized theirs back home. We had a hearing over Zoom a week later. My father's square stayed black, my mom's camera was on, her eyes wet, her hand on her heart like she was auditioning for sainthood. The judge's voice was flat when she read out the restraining order restrictions: no contact directly or through third parties, no gifts, no attempts to surveil us, no stepping foot within 1,000 feet of our home, our work, our son's daycare when he has one. The judge asked if either of them had anything to say. My father's attorney muttered something about misunderstandings. The order went through for a full year. 3 days later, a box showed up on our porch. No return address. It was the kind of thing that would have made me cry a year ago, a crocheted baby blanket and a plush lamb with glass button eyes. My stomach dropped before I even lifted it. It was too heavy for a toy that size. I called the detective before I touched it again. A patrol car came and the officer did the slow, careful thing with gloves and a flashlight and that little metal seam ripper. Inside the lamb-stitched belly was a tile wrapped in electrical tape to muffle it, wired to a coin battery. I stood there in my own hallway, breast milk leaking through my shirt, watching a cop pull a tracker out of a baby toy like a magician does scarves, and I felt something break and harden at the same time. They bagged the lamb and the blanket. The detective called back that night: violation of the order, new charge, recorded chain of custody, thank you for not ripping it apart yourself. If that wasn't enough, someone phoned in an anonymous report to wth.reddit the following week. Baby crying all day, unsafe home, parents using drugs. The caseworker was kind, and also, I could tell, used to this exact kind of call. She toured the nursery, peeped in our fridge, and laughed with me when my son grinned at her and immediately tried to eat her lanyard. She was in and out in under 40 minutes. I'm closing this as unfounded, she said in the doorway, and I nodded until my neck hurt. After she left, I sat on the floor and sobbed until my husband picked me up and put me in bed and put our son on my chest, and we all breathed together like we were one warm organism. Meanwhile, the business garbage came to a head. My husband's lawyer filed a books and records request. My father refused, then pretended to be confused, then sent over stacks of PDFs with pages missing. The court compelled production. When the actual books finally came, we found line items that made my husband go quiet: the tow trucks for the collector cars listed as security expenses, the trackers coded under it, a pie retainer buried as consulting, and loans to owner that had no paper trail at all. My husband didn't say anything for a long time. Then he looked up and said, "We're going to do this properly," and handed it all back to his attorney. There's a hearing next month on his right to inspect and a separate filing for misappropriation. He hasn't set foot on that property, exactly like they demanded. He also hasn't surrendered the part of himself that built things with integrity. They try another angle: 2 grandparents' rights in our old state, filed emergency, claiming we'd evaded service and that our son was in danger. We found out when forward mail delivered a thin packet and my name spelled wrong on a summons. Their petition was dismissed at the first pass because we don't live there anymore, and because, even if we did, we are a married, intact family. The judge's note was one line that felt like oxygen: "This is an inappropriate forum for harassment." And then, because apparently there need to be chapters within chapters, the detective called again. The DA in our new county took the case. The employee took a plea to a lesser charge in exchange for cooperating. Text between my mother and him times, my car description, even a hurry, she's leaving now from the day I left the coffee shop were entered into evidence. The off-brand tags, the tile and the lamb, the packages, the emails, they stitched together a case for stalking in violation of a protection order against my mother, and conspiracy against my father. There's a warrant to be served in their state with extradition flagged. I didn't feel triumphant hearing it. I felt grief, like attending a funeral for the version of family I wished existed. It hasn't all been war. Our son belly laughed for the first time last week at the dog yawning, and we caught it on my phone and watched it 4 times after he fell asleep. My husband taught me how to change the oil on our car in the driveway while the baby napped and the sun warmed the concrete. Our neighbor brought over a casserole and exactly 1 beer and sat on the stoop with my husband and talked about nothing heavy for an hour. I took my son to a mommy and me class and no one knew my last name or my mother's voice or how to pronounce my father's. We are building 1,000 tiny, normal moments and mortaring them together. Today, though, I walked out of the grocery store and there was a manila envelope tucked under my windshield wiper. No return address, again. It was a photocopy of the dismissed grandparents' rights petition and, in my mother's handwriting that I could recognize in a lineup, "You can't erase blood." I didn't touch it. I took a photo, called a detective, and waited in the car with the doors locked until a cruiser pulled up. The officer slid the envelope into a bag and asked if I was okay. I told him the truth: I'm tired. I'm also not going to bend. If there was any part of me that questioned whether going no contact made me the villain in some imagined story, those lines of text in a court docket and a tile sewn into a toy cured me of it. I won't let them make my son a prop in their theater. I won't let them turn my no into a maybe. I won't let them rewrite what happened, even if they shout. And if the stage they chose to stand on is a courtroom, then so be it. Update 3. The arrest didn't look like a movie. No blaring sirens, no spotlight, no shouted commands. The detective called it Sifa and 12 Ma. And said, "We've picked your mother up on the warrant." He said it cleanly, like he was reading from a grocery list. She was leaving a dermatology appointment. She had a tote bag with a floral scarf hanging out of it. A bailiff in their county told our DA she cried in processing and asked if she could keep her wedding ring on. My father didn't make them come find him. He walked into the courthouse with his lawyer and a jaw so tight it made the newspaper photo look like a statue. They both waived extradition. There's an arraignment in our state next week. I don't know if she'll look at me. I don't know if I'll look back. The cooperating employee turned over more than texts. His lawyer handed in a 4-minute voice memo he'd recorded months ago, mid-coffee break, where my father's voice is unmistakable, low and mean through trucka/C. Get eyes on them. I don't care how. She's ours. He's not taking her. You can hear the beep of a seatbelt not clicked in country radio under it, happy and oblivious. The DA played it for us on speakerphone in her office and then turned it off and looked at me like she knew she was holding a raw nerve. I don't think I exhaled until we were back in the elevator. It's not a straight line. 3 days after my mother was booked, the daycare we just enrolled our son in called to confirm our pickup passwords and to touch base about a call we got this morning. Someone claiming to me my mother tried to add herself to the authorized list. She said she was the one paying tuition, not true, and needed flexibility to be a grandma. They had our protective order on file. They recorded the voicemail. The director, who wears cartoon scrubs and knows every kid's favorite snack by heart, said she'd already emailed it to the detective and, without missing a beat, reminded me they'd do bubble day on Friday if the weather held. I sat on the kitchen floor with the phone to my ear and stared at the baseboard until my husband plucked it out of my hand, kissed my head, and put the kettle on. At the business hearing, my husband didn't bring me because he knew I'd clench my jaw until I cracked a molar. The judge wasn't interested in games. She ordered an independent CPA as a neutral to go line by line through the company's books. Words like receiver and forensic were tossed around. My father's attorney tried to flourish about ordinary course of business and disgruntled partner, and then the judge held up a printout of a ledger with my son's baby toy listed as it device asset tracking and raised an eyebrow so slow it should be in a textbook. You will produce full, unredacted records. You will not destroy or alter anything. If you do, we will talk about contempt. My husband said the silence after that was heavy. He walked out of the courthouse and didn't text me anything but a photo of an ice cream truck in the parking lot with a single kid's cone in his hand. When he got home, we split it, sticky and laughing, while our son tried to steal the napkin. Our mailbox is a character in the story whether we like it or not. A certified letter came, supposedly from an insurance broker, asking us to verify updated beneficiaries on a life insurance policy my parents took out on me when I was 19. I didn't know it still existed. The beneficiary field was blank, like a thread in a dare. Our attorney told me to send it straight to him. He used words like bad faith and weaponization. I signed a form and tried not to think about the math of my life on a piece of paper in someone else's desk. I kept thinking the manila envelope by my windshield would be the last of that particular trick. It wasn't. I walked out of Target on Tuesday with diapers and a candle that smells like grapefruit and clean floors, and there was a dollar store gift bag sitting on my driver's seat, dropped through an unlocked door. There was a glittery "It's a Boy" sticker on the handle and a folded card inside with no words, just a printed photo of my mother and me from when I was 5, at a fall festival, my face painted like a cat and her in a red sweater I can picture without even closing my eyes. The detective told me not to touch it and I didn't. They dusted my car in the lot like it was a TV set. The officer doing it hummed under his breath and apologized for the powder. Later, the lab called, partial print, low quality, good enough to show it wasn't mine, wasn't my husband's. They'll tie it in if they can. The DA's assistant sent me a single-line email that I read 3 times, "We will attach this as a violation." I answered, "Thank you." I wanted to write more. I didn't. If there is justice, it's bureaucratic and slow and looks like a paper jam. The judge in our old state sanctioned my parents' attorney for refiling the grandparents' petition thereafter it had already been thrown out. The note in the docket called it vexatious. The accountant appointed as neutral sent an initial letter that said, dryly, he'd like to meet at the business for on-site review and inventory. My husband forwarded it to his lawyer and they came up with a plan that ends with his key staying on our hook and him nowhere near that address. The lawyer will be his body. The paper will do the arguing. We are learning how to let other people pick up the fight. My mother has a court-appointed wth.reddit monitor. I know because her attorney called ours to assure us she won't come near us again, and because, a day later, a local TV station in their town ran a 30-second segment where the anchor mispronounced my last name and the footage showed a courthouse exit, my mother's ankle bare between a skirt hem and a sensible shoe, a plastic square blinking like a metronome. I did not send the link to anyone. It found me anyway. It hasn't all been courthouse chairs and cops in my living room. Our son cut his first tooth like a tiny pearl punching through a peach. He says ba for ball and da for the dog and mama mama when he's tired and angry and wants to be scooped up so he can bury his face in my neck and drool in my hairline. We planted 3 tomato starts in mismatched buckets along the fence and he patted the dirt solemnly like he was blessing it. A woman at the library handed me a board book and told me I had kind eyes. I cried for 3 minutes in the parking lot and then laughed at myself and texted my husband that I'd been complimented by a stranger and it turned me into soup. Yesterday, the DA's office emailed us the arraignment schedule with a note about victim input at bail. I wrote back and told them I don't want to speak. I don't want to look directly into that lens and feel like I'm on stage in a play they wrote. I want my boundaries to be boring and strong and held up by people whose job it is to enforce them. I want to be the person who goes to Trader Joe's and argues lightly with her spouse about which hummus to get and is wrong half the time on purpose. This morning, while my husband changed the oil on our car and the dog chased a fly with the fervor of a knight on a quest, I walked to the curb with a diaper bag, a grocery list, and a stack of outgoing mail. I dropped the envelopes, looked down the street, and saw nothing but a man jogging with headphones and a kid on a scooter with a sticky popsicle face. No drones. No boxes. No notes. The quiet wasn't heavy, it was full. If the next knock I hear is a process server or a neighbor with a pie, I'll meet it the same way, door lock clicked when I want, chain off when I choose. If this family story ends under fluorescent lights with plea deals and fines and a judge shaking her head, I will accept that. If it keeps going with paper cuts and court dates and me sitting in chairs that make my back hurt, I will still be home at night in a house with a lamp on and a baby that reaches for me with both hands. They can write motions until their wrists ache. I will be here, building a life that is not a negotiation. Update 4. Dear Raymond was fluorescent and airless. We logged into a Zoom with our names, and little white boxes like labels on jars. My mother's square came on and there she was, hair brushed within an inch of its life, a cardigan the precise shade of forgiveness. She said not guilty in a voice I'd heard, ordering coffee and apologizing to neighbors for the dog getting out and also telling me I was ungrateful. My father's attorney handled his plea. My father stared slightly off screen as if anything else in the room was more interesting than the list of charges. The judge repeated the no contact terms and added 2 new ones like you might add a padlock to a gate that keeps being jammed, no social media posts about me or my family, no adding themselves to any of our child's care or medical accounts. Directly or through agents. The DA mentioned the daycare voicemail in the manila envelope. The judge's mouth didn't move much when she spoke. It still felt like a door clicking shut. I kept my camera off. I watched my own black square with my married name typed neatly under it and breathed in 4-4, out 4-6, until it was over. It didn't stay hypothetical for long. The pediatrician's office called the next morning and the nurse who always asked how many wet diapers he's had today cleared her throat in a way that meant I hate this but here we are. Someone had faxed over a HIPAA authorization with my mother's signature, my full name, my son's date of birth, a request for full access to his chart. The header had my father's company fax number. The nurse's voice got tight when she said, "We already flagged it, we won't honor it, and our compliance officer has sent it to the detective." She ended with, "And also, he's due for his next set of shots next month, do Tuesday still work?" I put a star sticker on Tuesday in my calendar and then put my head on the counter and laughed because the absurdity of a rogue HIPAA form and tiny glitter stars living in the same 5 minutes broke something open in me. The neutral CPA sent his notice and then went to the business with a court order in his hand and a deputy at his elbow. My husband's attorney texted me a single sentence as it was happening, "They are trying to lock the door." I pictured my father with his jaw clicking, gesturing big, explaining how this was all a misunderstanding as the deputy stared at a deadbolt like it had feelings. They got in. The CPA sent an initial email that looked like it was written by a man who ironed his socks, unemotional bullet points transcribed as sentences, requests for bank statements that didn't exist, questions about cash withdrawals coded owner loan repayment without any loans to repay, photos of an unopened drone box in a supply closet with a sticky note that said marketing. He asked for policies on asset tracking devices. He asked for vendor contracts with a PI. Please also provide documentation regarding the purchase of tags on date, including business purpose and chain of custody. Words with teeth, hiding in folders. My husband sat at the table and read it twice. He didn't gloat. He underlined things and made more tea. The insurer called our attorney back about the policy my parents took out on me at 19. The man on the phone sounded like he'd spent his career saying ma'am in 4 different tones. He confirmed the owner was still my mother, the mailing address had been changed twice in the last 6 months, and there had been a recent request to increase coverage that stalled when they asked for new medical authorization. He said he couldn't send me anything without the owner's permission. He also said he'd put a flag on the account, add our protective order, and require notarized proof of identity for any change. "We see these family weaponizations," he said, like he was remarking on the weather. He didn't say what I thought, that someone had walked through a world where my death was a line on a ledger and a premium payment. The DA filed a motion to modify it, bail after the pediatrician, fax and the Target gift bag. We didn't have to go. The judge did the thing again where a calm voice is somehow worse than yelling. She tightened my mother's curfew to full house arrest except for work and medical appointments pre-approved by the court, required weekly in-person check-ins, and ordered her to surrender her passport within 24 hours. My mother's attorney tried to object and said the word grandmother, like it was a courtroom pass. The judge said, "This defendant has shown a pattern of contact by proxy. The court will not allow creative violations." The newspaper ran another inch-high rectangle with a typo in our name and bail modified. I didn't read the comments. We thought that might slow it. It didn't stop creative. An email came to my work account from a professional-looking address with a signature block that had a logo, 2 phone numbers, and a kind of legal disclaimer about viruses that makes you roll your eyes. It was a cease and desist demanding we remove my parents' names from any list that defamed their character, specifically at our son's daycare and pediatrician, and threatened litigation for tortious interference with grandparental rights. It CC'd a Yahoo account I know my mother used 10 years ago when she sent me recipes. The DA's office asked us to forward it. The assistant DA replied with a curt 2 sentences to their counsel about protective orders and sanctions. The daycare director sent me a screenshot, unbidden, of how our file now had a red bar across it that said court order no release. She added 3 sparkly heart emojis and bubble day still Friday. I saved it because Joy can live next to barbed wire. The CPA's second letter was sharper. He'd found payroll tax that went missing in a year it shouldn't have, a lease paid on a vehicle not titled to the company, and a retainer to the consultant that matched texts with my mother about updates on their address. He CC'd the court, who set a status hearing. My husband's lawyer pushed a motion that prevents company funds from being used for the personal criminal defense of any member. The judge granted it with a notation that made me wish I could frame a PDF. Corporate funds are not a wallet for individual misdeeds. Few days later, the CPA emailed that he showed up and was told the server crashed and we don't have those QuickBooks files anymore. He asked for the backup. He got a shrug. The judge's clerk slotted in an emergency hearing for spoliation. I have learned to say new words as if I've always had them. At 2:14 m. Last Thursday, my phone buzzed with an alert from the victim notification app I forgot I'd installed. It told me my mother's ankle monitor had left her approved zone for 12 minutes and then re-entered. I stared at the ceiling and thought about the exact 12 minutes that make up a bad idea. The next afternoon, the detective called to say pretrial services had knocked on her door at an unannounced hour and she was home, tight-lipped and blaming Bluetooth interference. The DA filed a notice anyway. The judge added a warning, one more glitch, and she waits for trial behind a door someone else locks. The crazy is never a single firework. It's a string of them with a slow fuse. We closed on our old house and the title company called because a lien had popped up the day before closing filed by my father, claiming an equitable interest for improvements and acquisition services. The title officer, who sounded like she'd seen everything and then saw us, flagged it as fraud and sent it to their underwriter. Our attorney responded with an affidavit and the protective order and a letter I wanted to pin to my wall for its surgical politeness. The underwriter cleared it in 24 hours. My father somehow timed a bouquet for the buyer's agent's office with a card that said, "Congratulations on your family's new home." The agent texted me a picture of the carnations and then put them in the break room trash. We set a hearing date in the business case and I didn't go again. My husband went with his lawyer, his hand steady on a legal pad, and watched my father get told by a judge that if another document disappeared, the court would consider appointing a receiver with full control. The neutral CPA used the phrase forensic image and on-site and my father's attorney blustered about trade secrets until the judge raised that eyebrow again like a slow metronome and said, "Your client is not entitled to a secret book for his partner." When my husband came home, he had grease on his wrist from changing a headlight in the parking garage to burn off the adrenaline. He kissed the baby and then me and then we all sat on the kitchen floor and ate cereal out of mugs because it felt almost illicit to be that uncomplicated. The next package that arrived wasn't plain. It was ecclesiastical. A mass card, embossed in cream, with a gilt edge, from a church I know my mother's friend attends, made out in remembrance of me. My husband found it in the mailbox and carried it in between 2 fingers like it was a spider. The priest had signed it with a fountain pen. There was a line for intentions, left blank. I called the number on the card and a woman with a voice that had soothed 1,000 funerals sounded truly appalled. She promised to speak to the Monsignor and added, "I'm so sorry you're dealing with this, dear," and it made me cry weirdly harder than anything. The detective picked it up. He told me the DA would add it to their stack labeled harassment artifacts. Lawyers and faith and postage stamps, woven into something mean. Somewhere in all this, I did a thing I'd been thinking about and then not letting myself think about. I filed to change my name. It wasn't about erasing the past, it was about putting the right sign on the door of the life I live. The hearing was 10 minutes with a judge whose robe sleeves were a little too long. He asked me if I was doing it to avoid debts or obligations or to defraud anyone. I said no. He asked me to spell the new name and I did, letter by deliberate letter. He stamped a piece of paper and slid it to me and said, "Congratulations," like it was a graduation. I walked to the DMV with a folder that held my birth certificate, our marriage license, and my son's crayon drawing that looked like pride. The lady behind the counter told me I'd taken a good photo. I texted my husband a selfie with a caption that just said me. He answered with a string of heart emojis and a photo of our son with hummus on his chin. The detective called again Tuesday. The cooperating employee had walked in more. He'd given them a spare phone my father provided for company matters that was really a little island of app for stalking Find My Variations, a notes app with addresses and tags, even a shared album named after my initials with photos of our old car, our old house, my mother's coffee cup on my porch the day she trespassed. The DA's office used the phrase pretrial posture and plea overtures. My mother's attorney floated a version where she'd plead to 1 count, do 2 years of probation, counseling, and have the violations consolidated. My father's counsel scoffed. The DA did not. We are not bargaining with air, she said. She doesn't get to apologize to the court while she's sending mass cards. She used the present tense and I loved her for it. It isn't all head nodding in hallways and waiting for calendar invites. Our neighbor's peach tree is dropping fruit faster than anyone can keep up, and he left a cardboard box of them on our porch with a note that said eat or cobbler. Our son took a bite and closed his eyes like he'd met God. We went to a block party and someone's Bluetooth speaker played early 2000s hits and I felt both 17 and 30 at once. The dog befriended a mail carrier so thoroughly I might as well give up pretending to have a guard animal. We sat on a blanket in the park and my husband fell asleep with his arm over his face and our baby rolled toward that arm like it was a homing beacon and fell asleep too. For 20 minutes, I watched their chests rise and fall while a plane put a chalk mark across the sky. The spoliation hearing is set for next week. The DA told me to expect a call about victim input at another bail review if more violations land. I ordered a label maker and spent an hour putting our new last name on spice jars because sometimes the only battle I want to fight is cumin versus coriander. Yesterday, a stranger in a gray sedan idled too long at the end of our block and my heart sprinted. Then she backed into my neighbor's driveway and carried 2 grocery bags inside. I felt stupid and also not. Fear taught me to look twice. Safety taught me to keep the photos and write down the plate if I need to. If this ends with pleas and probation and fines that don't feel like scales balancing, I will still have tomato plants that lean toward the light and a son who reaches with both hands and a paper with a judge's stamp that says I am who I say I am. If it keeps going, if paper keeps arriving and hearings keep scheduling and someone somewhere keeps thinking they can bend something that is set, they will run, eventually, into a wall I didn't build alone. The house arrest beeps, the red bar across a daycare file, the CPA who irons his socks, the deputy with a gaze like a locked door, pieces of a boundary I'm not shouldering by myself anymore. Today, our son said a new sound that was almost up, and I lifted him, and he laughed into my collarbone until he hiccuped. The stove timer ranged for a peach cobbler. My phone stayed quiet. The quiet felt earned. I don't mistake it for surrender. I'm learning to let the quiet be a room I can sit in without checking the deadbolt every 3 breaths. They can keep mailing God and judges and anyone else willing to sell a stamp. I will keep choosing who stands on my porch. I will keep building a life that doesn't ask for permission.